To another Atomic Mass Transmissions Live. I'm Director of Product Development, Will Schick, and I'm excited to be here with you to paint some ninjas. But unlike most ninjas who run around in black garb and dark colors, these ninjas run around in red. So we're going to be painting a ton of red. I wore my red Spider-Man shirt in lieu of all of the red hand ninjas I'm going to be painting today. These fine fellows, fine ninja masters, come in the Shadowland, Daredevil, and Elektra character box for Marvel Crisis Protocol. We've painted Daredevil, we've painted Elektra. It's time to paint some ninjas. So let's get this camera off of me, get it onto the ninjas, and let's start painting some red. Volume. Oh, I'm too loud. You got to turn down the volume. I'm blowing them out.
I did it. I worked on it.
Oh my gosh. Summer just really wants you to know how excited we are for ninjas here. So that's really what's going on. So to start, I've done my Zenith Prime. I'll turn on this little light here. So we Zenith primed everything with the ninjas. I've put them all together because why paint them separately? There's enough space between them and it's fine. I'm going to start by using Vallejo Air Red, which is a color you see us use a lot. The nice thing about it being an airbrush color is that it's already nice and thinned out, so it makes a really great wash right from the pot. And we're just going to start blazing on this red over this Zenith Prime. Zenith Prime. I don't know why I almost developed like an Austrian accent there for a second. It wasn't intentional, I swear. So we're just going to start blocking out all of our reds. And this will carry us most of the way through this massive 3 ninja set. So Dallas definitely had way too much fun concepting these ninjas, and that fun translated into a lot of Marco pain for the engineers and stuff. But yeah, it was, these were actually the first of the grunts that we developed and designed. So the hand ninjas came before the shield agents actually in terms of the sculpt and everything, and Dallas was just like, how crazy can we get? I was like, I guess we'd get pretty crazy. And so we started talking about hand ninjas. We pulled up a bunch of art, and they always pop up from ninja smoke or vanish in ninja smoke. You know, the hand ninjas are always just right around the corner. So we started playing with that idea, and Dallas drew this really over-the-top, like 3 ninjas jumping out of a smoke cloud concept, and we knew right then and there, we're like, all right, well, that's super cool. We kind of have to do this now. And so we did it. And yeah, I don't know that we'll ever do it again quite like this. So these ninjas might be the ultimate in terms of just the over-the-topness of the grunts, but it was very cool to do. And they look super dope and awesome. And yeah, now we're gonna paint them all red. So I haven't quite decided how I'm gonna handle the undershirts and stuff. I know that Brendan, who painted the studio miniatures, he hit the undergarments under the gi as black. But I was looking at a lot of references, and there's not a whole lot of not red on these ninjas. So we might shift over to like a different colored red. Maybe we'll do a little bit of black. I don't know. I'm very wishy-washy right now. I like the idea of using a different color than just red, but then again, you know, red is very hand ninja, so we might just go all the way with the red. Oh, Summer sadly wasn't here to help us do the live action poses. Now, if you had been though, Summer, we would have definitely made you jump out of the smoke with us. Set up the camera and just been like, all right, let's do this. I think we're just gonna go all the way in on the red here. I don't even care. I don't even care anymore. That undershirt's gonna be red, the mask is gonna be red, everything's red. It's all red all the time. And we'll go back in and we'll use some different values of red to kind of change some things out, maybe make some nice color breaks. But we can just start our process here with all the red, all of it. Any more reveals? It depends on what kind of reveals you're looking for. There's obviously tons more stuff in the works. We've got a lot of stuff that I'm sure BK is getting prepped and ready to start showing off. But BK, you know, he's got whims. the man does things at his own speed and schedule. But I would imagine here in the next, well, if not this month because it's a short month, but certainly in March, there's going to be some cool new stuff to show off for Marvel Crisis Protocol. We got all kinds of good stuff coming. We're always working. One of the biggest hurdles that we've been working on kind of addressing everything has, of course, been the craziness of COVID and how it's changed some of our delivery dates in terms of global shipping and the crisis there. And we always talk about how those fine logistic folks who have to deal with all of that craziness are true warriors. They are definitely heroes. They get stuff thrown at them all of the time. And I do not envy them. I'm very appreciative for all of the hard work that they put in. If you happen to be dealing at any level of shipping in any way, shape, or form, or logistics, thank you so much. You have both my sympathy and my respect, because man, it is not easy. So that has shifted some of our dates and things like that, but it doesn't stop us in the office. We continue to just churn everything out, turn it over to the fine production folks at Asmodee North America who handle all of the actual like physical production stuff and work with us to make sure that it all happens. And then eventually BK gets to show the world. And we get to have fun painting it on the stream. Where's the Elektra card? I don't know. Where is it? I have one in a binder at my house, but not here. So the paint that I'm using right now, this is just Vallejo Air Red. So you can get it anywhere that sells the Vallejo Airline, and it's just literally the Vallejo Air Red out of the bottle. Put it, I add a little bit of water to it, but not too much, just to like loosen it up. We've used it a ton in other streams and things like that. It's fantastic. Haven't tried a ton of the other air colors from Vallejo, but I imagine they would all work very similar to this kind of high contrasty like coloring. But for blues, like when I'm doing blues and stuff like that, I really like, of course, Hold Your Blue. As people who watch the streams a lot know, we love our Hold Your Blue, so I didn't really have to go looking for a color there. And then I haven't really had a lot of occasion to paint a ton of greens, to be honest with you. So often I'll just use whatever green is available or around and thin it out into a wash. I don't paint a lot of greens, which is weird. I feel like in the past I used to paint a ton of greens, but there's not that much green in Marvel, you know, outside of your Hulks and stuff, but that's taken care of pretty easy. So Elektra's threat, oh, I can reveal that right now because why not? She is threat 4. And of course the second parent to the ninjas, so she is right in there with Mr. Shadowland Daredevil. And Dallas, I'm sure, talked a lot about the design process and stuff with her during his wonderful painting stream last week when he knocked out an amazing looking skin tone for her. I was so jealous. I immediately asked him right afterwards. I was like, what were the colors that you used? Because I must steal them. But yeah, she was a fun one. And by fun, I mean that she gave us the most grief out of everything in that wave of playtesting. It was really difficult to find the right kind of spot for her to occupy. Dallas and Josh, not Dallas. Dallas did the pose concept, obviously, which turned out phenomenal. But Josh and Pagani actually did the initial design for Elektra, because Josh, as we've discussed before, is the biggest Daredevil fan of life. And therefore, he also loves Elektra with all of his little heart. So he and Pagani got together and knocked out kind of this crazy assassin-y concept for Elektra. It was really weird and off the wall, which was kind of fun. Then we kind of pulled it back a little bit because it was really wild. Like she didn't build power at all through anything that she did, except by dealing like she had a superpower instead, and it did this thing, and it was very different. It was kind of cool. So we took kind of the kernel or the foundation of what they did there with her mystical kind of ninja-ness, and we reframed it a little bit to make her more like a traditional Crisis Protocol character. Brought back some of the power generation and that stuff. And then she originally wasn't going to be one of the parents for the ninjas. And throughout the process, the production process and some of the playtest stuff, we came to the conclusion that, it would actually be really cool and actually work better if she did come with the ninjas, or she could control the ninjas as well, just like Daredevil. And wouldn't that be interesting, because then you have options on the table, and if you're playing with both characters, you can like call them in different spots and all this stuff. So she's still weak enough to, no, she's definitely, Bullseye can one-shot her if she's down to 1 health, because that's what Bullseye does, right? Okay, I think I got all of my reds for that initial base. So now I'm going to move over to some Chimera colors. And we're going to just mix up kind of a darker sanguine kind of color. So I'm sure if Summer set up this fancy little palette cam, so if she could jump over to there and we can watch as I kind of start mixing my little colors here on the palette. And we'll see what we can get to. I'm just going to start playing around. So I have the Chimera red, I've got red oxide, and then I have my black and my white. And I'm just kind of going for something that's a little bit on the, like a wine. So add a little bit more red to that. I'm kind of wondering if I want to get a little magenta in there. I think I might. I'm going to grab a little bit of this magenta. So I'm just going to, there we go. Drop a little bit of that Chimera magenta out. There we go. Mix that in. Come over here and just do a little bit more on the black. Let's see what we got. Responses now. And next, extravaganza. So our next mini extravaganza, we're currently looking at probably early June right now. Yeah, this is getting where I want it. Okay. So I'm pretty happy with that. That's got kind of that crimson, deep, sanguine wine feel to it that I want. I can play with that for sure. Add a little bit more water to it. But BK is going to be announcing a lot more about what to expect from Mini Extravaganza. He and Summer are working on doing all the plans and stuff for that event. But right now it's looking like it's going to be right around that June mark, so a little later this year than others, but part of the reasoning for that is we have some cool things in the works that we want to make sure are prepared and ready to show off, and thinking about like kind of how the overall shipping stuff has gone globally and everything else. Just making sure that everything's going to kind of work out the way we want it to. So like I said, we're doing all the reds here. Have I ever drank my paint water by accident? No, I don't think I've ever drank my paint water by accident. I have absolutely 100% cleaned my brushes in my coffee. That happens way more than I'd like to admit, to be honest. In fact, if I am drinking coffee and painting in the morning, there's a 100% chance that my brush is going in the coffee and getting cleaned that way. And then I have to say my choice words in the morning, and then I continue to drink my coffee and clean off my brush from the coffee. So it definitely happens. So I know, I was in the tank, the color mixing tank, I had to figure out how to get the right tone that I wanted here, that right red. But yes, so mini extravaganza absolutely coming. The plan is still to do 2 this year. So even though the first one will be a little later than it has been, than it was last year, I guess. Last year was the first time we did the kind of early year one. We're still definitely planning on holding 2 this year. We have so much fun with those. Just enjoy hanging out and showing off everything we're working on, getting to talk to everybody. But timing-wise, we just felt like we were going to have the best mini extravaganza experience if we pushed it a little later. So be a little bit of a wait, but you'll always have these streams with us over the week. Coffee does not wash the way that you hope, to be honest. I would not suggest painting with coffee. Unless you're coffee staining something, in which case then, it kind of works, but not the best. It would be much worse. No, if I make sure that I don't have anything on the table when I'm like doing oil washing or anything like that, because that would be bad. But in this joyous world of non-toxic acrylic hobby paints, you can afford to make these kind of awful mistakes and not have to worry about ingesting some cadmium or some other kind of dangerous heavy metal. It's very good. But you should always know what you're painting with, because there are still artist paints and stuff out there that do utilize, the not non-toxic materials. So pay close attention. For sure, safety should always be first. All right. A little bit more water here. Get these guys' leg wrappings all painted up. And so again, like the goal really for me is to just make sure that these hand ninjas are as red can be, and then we'll start like doing some washing and some differentiation. Like on this darker red area, I'm definitely going to use probably more of a blue shade wash, which will really bring it down compared to the brighter red, which I'll probably use more of a traditional like crimson ink wash I'll use the crimson ink from Scale. 75 ink tense, and that will make sure that it's nice and bright. I can already see that I've missed some spots on camera, but I'll go back and fix those later. I'm trying to paint 3 ninjas in an hour. It's not going to happen, but let's keep going. I know that as far as for folks who turned in playtest applications, Sarah Rowan, or Rowan as we kind of go by last names in the dev department. Everybody just goes by their last name. Was going through everything and I think finalizing stuff. So I would expect that there will be some communications sent out to groups in the next couple of weeks. But we've had a busy January, February are always exciting times when you work, at least in the gaming industry, because it feels like every deadline that you ever have to deal with is due in February or before then. And a lot of that just has to do with like production timelines and kind of how things get figured out. A lot of the end of the year stuff, for the current year becomes due here. And a lot of projects because of, the old school summer convention seasons, which hopefully we'll get back to, and all that stuff. A lot of focus is put on kind of the bigger projects winding up closer towards the end of the year, where they line up with, your Gen Cons and your UK Games days and expos and all that stuff. And so it's not like we ever don't have things that we're always working on. We're always working. Like sharks, you got to keep swimming. Otherwise you'll drown. We're always working, but the bigger projects always seem to kind of come due right around here. So that can definitely change stuff as well. We, as a studio, did not go to Gamma, but I know Asmodee North America and, the fine folks that we work with as part of the Asmodee family did go, or are going, will go. I think Gamma hasn't happened yet this year, right? It's a little later. But they'll all be there, showing off some stuff, and we're working with them on some cool things that they're planning to do. I know that they want to run a couple of events and things like that. Full Gamma experience. So a couple meetings with them to get all that stuff set up. So it should be a pretty fun time for those who are going to attend. It's part of the industry. But Atomic Mass itself, like nobody from the studio will be there this year. How do I feel about the current state of play for MCP, Rock and Groot? I'm very, very happy with where I think the state of play for the game is right now, and I know it's been really fun and really rewarding to kind of see the small character rebalances that we did last go around, or some of the bigger ones, depending on which character it was. But just that overall character rebalance affect the game and kind of the team compositions and the roster building and stuff for people. I would say that from my vantage point, at least, we definitely hit exactly what we were hoping for, which was, to kind of smooth out and tighten up that bell curve. We always talk about how perfect balance is never what we're looking for, because that just makes the game the same. Your ninjas are the same as your Daredevil, which is the same as your Thor. And I don't think nobody wants that, right? We all want these characters to feel unique and interesting and to have compelling choices. But the real challenge comes in, okay, you're going to have differences and there's going to be a power level, but keeping that power level, that bell curve, as tight as possible so that things at the bottom or on the left side of the curve are as close as they possibly can be to things on the right side of the curve. So your weakest thing and your strongest thing are super, super close in terms of just general power level, which then allows things like player skill, player choice, mission selection, dice randomness, all of that stuff to come in and start to really affect how things perform, so that even if you're at the top of the bell curve, a more skilled player, a more practiced player, a slightly luckier player, a combination of everything will come in and suddenly make the entire character or roster or whatever have you have a different valuation on the curve. You can look at the numbers, you can number crunch and figure out what is the most efficient thing from a spreadsheet standpoint. But from our standpoint, great game designs and things that are really fun and stay fresh and exciting for a long time, they often surprise you once you put them into practice, right? If the spreadsheet math always works every time exactly as the spreadsheet says it would, then there's typically a problem. And that's, again, like my opinion, man. But it's important because it's the opinion that kind of drives what we do in development, and we kind of all go with that. So, yeah, the Doom prophecy change, we kind of, here's a little inside baseball. We kind of always knew it wasn't going to last on the restricted list very long, but oftentimes when you start making changes and you do a lot of them and, something like that, you want to do it in stages, It's like cooking. Don't turn the heat on super high and then just throw whatever you're trying to cook in there and be like, all right, it's burned on the outside and raw on the inside. Let's let it go. Sometimes just letting things have their time and observing everything in action and kind of seeing what the results are before you go in and kind of call the thing done is a good way to approach stuff. And so that's kind of what we did with that card. No one was going to take the office bet that it was going to stay on the restricted list. But that was kind of where we started. Okay, I know I missed some spots. I'll go back and clean those up later. So where do I want to go next? I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to find some blue. Ink, maybe? Oh my gosh, these paints are a mess. Who was in here last summer? Who did this?
Not revealing any secrets.
I'm gonna blame Tony. I think it's Tony's fault. Tony should know better. There we go. Okay. Grab some Inktense blue. And do this not on my wet palette because that would be a mess. That's not open. Nobody's ever used this color before. Perfect. There. Okay. And then we're gonna grab some of this medium. Doom Prophecy was one of those interesting ones. I mean, it was a very powerful card. We talked about it a lot. You know, it was banned and restricted. When we discussed the banned and restricted list and kind of what it did, it's a very exciting card. I don't think it ever got to the point that it was just. It never got to the point where it was like a problem. But I do think that, you know, from a standpoint of the flavor and where it stood within the realm of cards, it was always kind of intended as one of the Asgard cards. It just wound up being unrestricted in terms of just being a non-affiliated card. And I think, you know, giving that back to Asgard and letting them have that uniqueness to the idea of prophecy and how important it is to the legends and the stories of those characters felt right. And it also, you know, of course, as always, opened up some more options and possibilities for us for future character designs, and we don't have to be as worried about, you know, maybe a Strength 5 rapid fire character. Who knows? Certainly not something that we could have ever done before, but now, maybe. You know, I don't know if that world exists for us, but these are kind of the things that you always think about as you go in and start adjusting things like that. What do you have to always watch out for in the future because something exists now? And a lot of the times, those things are totally fine. Sometimes you kind of wish that you had a way to adjust it, and, you know, you just kind of like play it by ear. I got some stuff on that guy's head. Blame whoever isn't there. That's usually I just blame Tony, but he's such a good sport about it. It's hard not to. He usually just shrugs and is like, yeah, it's probably my fault. You're like, great. Not only do I get to blame somebody, but I don't have to feel bad about it because you're just so affable. He's such an affable man. I feel like Summer is... I haven't blamed Summer for anything yet, so I don't know because I'm still a little scared of Summer, but I feel like Summer mostly would take the same response. Oh, she does... all right, well, I've learned something today. We're not going to blame Summer about anything. Knock that stuff in. Faction packs for Crisis Protocol. Anything's possible. We're certainly, you know, introducing the card pack idea with the card pack that's going to be coming out closer towards the midpoint of this year, which will have the adjusted character stat cards for all of the rebalances that we did, the tactic cards and things like that. So I think, you know, creating ways for people to have access to the non-character stuff that you may want that adds value to that is definitely important and something we're looking more into. I don't know if faction packs would necessarily be the way to go because the game overall, unlike, you know, any of the other games that we work on, is completely factionless. You have affiliations which kind of drive player choices and roster constructions, but you literally don't have to follow them if you don't want to. I mean, I've played unaffiliated a couple of times on game streams now, and, you know, with the right tactics and combinations and things like that, you don't really feel the absence as painfully, which was always the goal. I think rewarding people for playing somewhat thematically or within certain bounds is great, but we also want that ability to just go crazy and do whatever you want when it comes to living your Crisis Pearl kind of dream. Yeah, the card pack will have, the one that comes out this year, they'll have the horizontal cards, the horizontal layout cards, just like in the print and play thing, the document. They'll be the exact same cards, they'll just be printed out. So they will be horizontal. Okay, where do I want to go next? I think, pretty happy with that. We'll just go in and I'm going to start knocking out some quick highlights. Yeah, the Ghost Rider adjustments, I agree. They were fun to work on. And I don't know, I mean, again, I don't think necessarily any of the characters that we were working on or that got adjusted were in horrible spots, but it's kind of one of those things that we talked about a lot in the articles and stuff. The more experience you get to with something, the more you see it kind of in action. There are just small things that you always go, well, I wish we had done this a little differently, or I wish we had done this a little better. And it was awesome to have a unique opportunity to kind of go back and apply those lessons and, take a step with that. With the game that moved it into a light where we're very happy. I mean, we were very happy with where the game was sitting before. But now, it's difficult to not be like, well, it's really, really top shape now, We're going to avoid this getting too pink, but we want that. So as I'm going through these highlights, I'm just using the wet palette to mix up some quick colors. Still using that Chimera red, white, black, and magenta. Just doing some really quick, rough highlighting, and then likely once I'm done with that, what I'll do is I'll go back through with a red glaze and I'll just glaze everything back down. So I'm not super concerned necessarily with making really smooth transitions. I'm mostly just trying to make sure that my highlights are not really thick, but if the colors aren't transitioning perfectly from one color to the next, that's okay, because the glaze that I'll do over the top of everything will help mute and smooth out those transitions for me. So just a nice way to approach this kind of stuff and make it go quick. Do we take different approach? I take a different approach to designing characters that are likely to get additional versions down the line versus those that may only get one. That's a good question. Not really. I suppose the way in which we kind of do that is when we pick a character to do, we always have a pretty good discussion about what era, what version, what comic run, where's that character in their journey, right? Because Marvel has such a long history, and the characters in it, for the most part, outside of some of the newer characters, like maybe a Honey Badger, an X-23, or a Ms. Marvel, a Kamala Khan, they have 30, 40, 60 years of history to draw from. And we talk about, it's impossible from a sculpting standpoint, from a design standpoint, from a development standpoint, to make that one character encapsulate every single thing that they are over the course of that storied history. And so we do, and we have from the very start, always taken the mentality that the most important decision that we make is beyond just we're going to approach this character next, is what era of the character are we doing? I know a lot of people always ask questions like, how do they choose affiliations for this stuff? Like, where are these decisions being made? Why is Magneto, for instance, not in X-Men? And, the answer to that question is well, because this version of Magneto, the version of Magneto we chose to do, is the traditionally classic villain of the X-Men. He's not the Eric Magnus who hangs out and decides to work with the X-Men. He is their foe and always at odds with them. And someday when we do the true, redeemed white Magneto, that version is just a different version of Magneto. He'll have different abilities. He'll have a different kit. He'll bring different options and opportunities to the table. And, both of them will, of course, control magnetism. But there's so much character and flavor and differences that can be made in terms of how that Magneto functions compared to the other one, right? The redeemed Magneto who works with, redeemed is in quotes, of course, who works with the X-Men, he's probably not going to be destroying the city quite as much as, our current version of Magneto in his heyday of brotherhood of evil mutants hanging out on an asteroid in space does. He's going to be more kind of focused on potentially protecting the city, redeeming, his past errors, being a bit more benevolent. And so those are kind of the things that they go, right? So that's kind of how we approach it. And then what that does often is, it just automatically makes it so easy for us in the future to be like, okay, well, we just did this character not too long ago, or we did this character a long time ago. How do we now do a new version of the character that's going to feel fresh and different and intriguing and unique? And you see that, I think, hopefully you really see that, we've done a new version of Spider-Man that shows a very different point in his career. And Peter Parker's mastery over his abilities between the Amazing Spider-Man and then the general Spider-Man that you get in the core box. Non-title Spider-Man. Plain old Spider-Man, I don't know. There's probably a good moniker for unmonikered Spider-Man. Or Doctor Strange was another really fun one to do because that one, whereas with, Spider-Man and the two versions there, we were really drawing on his kind of journey and progression as he aged in the comics. Doctor Strange was very much pulled from a very, specific comic run. With the newest version of Doctor Strange owing a lot of the design and choices to that incredible run after the Empiricool show up, nearly erase destroying magic from the Earth, and then he's forced to go into space because Tony Stark is like, hey, I got a spaceship. Maybe space will have your answer. Go to space. I feel like Tony was just trying to get him out of town so that he could go have a party at the Sanctum or something, because those are really weird. It's a very Tony Stark solution to something. Magic has nearly been erased from the world. My magic isn't as strong. Well, what if you went to space? I got a spaceship. Go to space. So anyway, random tangents aside, that storyline was so kind of inspiring and evocative of that character design. He's the Scalpel of Strange. He has the mystic armor, these things that he starts to build as he learns how other planets and cultures have learned to harness the power of magic in different ways. So, there's comic runs, there's character growth and progression over the long course of their histories, all that stuff. Yeah, and there's lots of different personas. I mean, obviously the chat's going crazy with like Hulk, and then there are brand new things and all of that. Threat 4 Rogue Agent, who knows? Yeah, maybe. Rogue Agent definitely exists. That's another really interesting. We talked about how, a little bit about Doom Prophecy and how that affects your decision making and stuff. Rogue Agent is kind of a neat one because of how it changes roster construction options and opens up certain more limited affiliations to have maybe a bit more flexibility and stuff like that. Wakanda, which is still relatively a compact affiliation, can greatly benefit a lot more from a rogue agent than, say, an Avengers can or an X-Men even can at this point. But rogue agents are also somewhat tricky because you have to always make sure that the rogue agent isn't the most compelling or the only choice for the faction. You don't want to push out actual like narrative faction choices for rogue agents. And so they kind of exist in this weird space where you're always evaluating them against everything in all affiliations ever. But they also, add that important punch of flavor. And every character that is a rogue affiliation or rogue agent, I think has a very strong canonical reason for it to be a rogue agent. Winter Soldier, was the very first rogue agent, and also Bucky was the whole reason we came up with the rule in the first place, because we were talking about like, well, what affiliations does Winter Soldier go in? Like, where does he make sense? And what we really came across is like, well, like in the comics, Bucky kind of just does everything. He's just around. He shows up in so many runs, and there's like, Bucky, Winter Soldier, what are you doing here? He's like, I have my reasons. And then he just goes off and, typically works well with whoever's there, or winds up going back to being brainwashed to work with the villains or whatever, And so the rogue agent idea kind of came out of like playing with that idea and this kind of story in the comics and stuff. Does AMD plan to keep releasing big waves to flesh out existing major rosters like Ashman, or get wide release? We don't really. I don't know if we really plan releases in that way. We typically like to work on thematic blocks of stuff. So, smaller affiliations like, say, Wakanda or Midnight Suns, somewhat more unique or like less explored within the terms of like what characters are and stuff. We think those are important to do because they just add that excitement and that interest to the game, and getting to do something like the Midnight Suns, the monster, magical demon hunter type group was super fun, and I think brings something that's really interesting to the game, makes the universe feel more akin to the Marvel Universe and stuff. But we do sometimes go into things knowing that, expansion possibilities for somebody that are going to be fewer and far between. It doesn't mean that we never will come back to them. And I think in the case of Wakanda, there's absolutely room to explore and expand, and we want to get there. And I have no doubt that we will. But there's only so many hours in the day, and there's only so much production capacity. And I think, there's only so much time people have to devote to the hobby and stuff. So we always try to balance against that as well. If I could just have my wish, we'd have everybody right away. But it doesn't work that way. And we often get ourselves into trouble when we start thinking that way, the excitement, the rush, the desire to get into everything and have every character out there, it's real strong. And it's one of those things that we always have to kind of gut check ourselves with and being like, we're doing too much, too fast. Like, let's pull back a little bit and give this room to breathe or revisit this, you know? So, but yeah, there's always plans in the works when we typically start developing any affiliation. We do take a little bit of a look at, okay, well, where can we go next with this? What can we do with it? But I think that's, another really exciting thing about Crisis Protocol in general is that every release can expand your favorite affiliation. They might not be, included in the affiliation per se, but you can always forge your own roster and create your own kind of Marvel storyline and your own unique universe by adding characters that you love to that affiliation and finding character combinations that work and expand on it. So, I think unlike in other more traditional experiences that have more factions and stuff where your favorite faction or group within the game can just suddenly stop getting anything for a long, long time. The way that Crisis Protocol just allows the freedom and customization and flexibility, you can always have that sense of freshness, that newness. And that was really important to us as well. And it does free us up a lot to be able to do things like suddenly drop Midnight Suns or some other kind of like crazy random thing that would be really hard to do if you were always having to consider, well, variety demands that you then spend this much time on this thing or that thing. And that can be a pretty harsh limiter sometimes. And some people will just be like, well, but I just want all of X, Y, or Z. I don't care about anything else. Like, I get that. I think that everybody has that feeling, and that's a perfectly valid desire. Unfortunately, it's just not a realistic desire. It's not one that's going to get met. Summer knows. She has a 12-year-old. That's like parenting 101. Well, I get that you want this thing, but I'm afraid that you can't have it. I know. I still do it. My wife is like, but you can't have this thing. And I'm like, but I want it. And I'm an adult. And she's like, no. And I'm like, fine. And then I secretly oversalt her food to get back at her. That's not true. I would never do that. She would know right away. The only real way to get back at somebody when you're cooking is to under-flavor their food. Make their life bland. That's true revenge. Deny them the spice. Let's see. 2.5. So many questions about 2.5. I would say that we are very much on track based on the conversations that I had this morning. And we have one final step in the process before those documents can be approved. So, barring unforeseen catastrophe, which, I never discount in my life because you never know. I read the Odyssey. I know. You don't snub the gods. That's how you wind up on an Odyssey. Which, to be fair, didn't really seem like that much of a negative for Mr. Odysseus. Like, his crew got the shaft. But he seemed to turn out just okay. I mean, he just got delayed. He got to go on an adventure, which they then told all these kinds of stories about. So that seems kind of questionable, but whatever. But yes, everything 2.5 related is still on track and is very close. Are Elektra and Daredevil going to have issues being on the same? Not really. I mean, we absolutely did a ton of testing with both of them on the table in the same squads and sharing the hand ninjas, as it were, because you obviously can only have one grunt unit on the table or one grunt character on the table at a time. And you just have to plan around it. You know when you want one character to be closer to the ninjas than the other. And the thing is that it doesn't matter which character has put them into play. For example, Daredevil's Demon's Devastation attack, which wants the hand ninjas to be close by so that he can get that sweet bonus 2 die on the attack. It doesn't matter if Elektra put them into play or if Daredevil put them into play, right? You're going to get those bonuses regardless because they're an allied hand ninjas unit. So in that way, it really doesn't make a huge deal. Where it kind of comes into play more is, once they're on the table, you're not going to be able to flexibly bring them into a different zone. So you are kind of committing a little bit to positioning. And there are ways to cheat that. You can ninja vanish with the ninjas and set up some pretty gross, kind of double ninja activations in a way, which is pretty cool. And that was part of the impetus behind the ninja vanish and the way that it works and stuff. And that can let you kind of yo-yo the ninjas back and forth between the two, and that can be pretty enjoyable and exciting if you get it set up right. But it takes some planning and some play to kind of get that locked in. So it really just makes the options pretty fun and exciting. Is there a concern with Black Order's leadership and the grunts? I don't have a concern. If you're playing against Black Order and you take grunts, then you'll probably have a concern. But, that's kind of is there a concern for running a bunch of 2-threat characters against Black Order? It's, you're choosing to do that. There are definitely benefits and negatives to doing so. So you just have to think about that, These are choices that you're making, and those choices have consequences. And they can be both good and bad consequences, I've certainly seen some results where the Black Order player got really fixated on, how easy will it be to get rid of these grunts? And then they kind of got kited in a way that did not work out well for them. And then you also have the choice to just not play. If you're really worried about it, don't take characters with grunts in that matchup. You get to make those decisions in roster construction. You don't just walk to the table, if you're playing in the way that the core rules describe, right, where you have your roster of 10 and you're choosing after, before you actually sit down and start playing with your opponent, after you've seen each other's rosters and all that stuff. If you're not, well, then, just work around it and view it as a challenge, and it's not a huge deal. But if you are playing with the full roster construction rules and, you're seeing that your opponent could run Black Order against you and you want to take grunts, well, either don't take grunts or make sure what the disadvantages to having the grunts against Black Order may have. That said, ninjas are pretty slippery, so as long as you're setting them up in positions where you can utilize Ninja Vanish really well and stuff like that, you might lose a VP or two, you might lose no VPs, it's just play. Again, it's up to you to kind of figure out the tactics for that. It's not going to be super broad, characters except grunts. It's not going to be super broad. One of the balancing factors to the fact that you get to play with grunts and get a quote unquote free character to use in your games is that they're characters. So, they might get eaten by a carnage. They might trigger something like the Black Order's leadership. You can't, on the one hand, you don't want something to only be a net benefit. That's not interesting. You want there to be questions and challenges and balance and all that stuff to it. So a lot of that stuff is very intentional. Like, it's counterplay, and that's good. And yeah, there are good matchups and bad matchups, but there are good matchups and bad matchups for literally everything in the game, And if there isn't, then that's when you start to run into those, well, I think we have a problem here. So all that stuff is very much taken into account and watched for in playtesting and part of the discussion. And, some of it, not all of it, because there's absolutely things like we talk about all the time. There are more games played once something comes out than we can ever hope to play in testing. And that's just the nature of these games. But that's also why we watch and take an active hand in tending the garden, as it were. But there are absolutely, counterbalances and things put into play on purpose with this stuff. And there are times where something's not the best option. But that's why you get so much flexibility and choice when it comes down to everything. All right, well, we did pretty good for an hour. The reds are coming along really nice. They're almost done. I'm probably going to do like one more level of highlight, and then we'll do some washing down, all that good stuff, and then we get to do everything else with the ninjas. But very excited with where these are going. Red's looking great. So much red. We were here. We had a good time. With that, thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to come back tomorrow. Dallas Kemp is going to be painting some Star Wars Legion at 1 p.m. Pacific, and then I will be back next week, Tuesday, 1 p.m. Pacific, with some more Star Wars action. I'll also be back with some Marvel Crisis Protocol stuff. So we've got all of the great and awesome content coming your way. And of course, watch out for all of the latest and greatest BK and summer news that comes out on our social medias. There's going to be plenty of announcements this week that I think people will be pretty excited about, and we're going to continue to roll on with our stuff. Until next time, thank you so much for joining me. We'll see you on the next one. Be good to each other. Take care, and goodbye. Boop-a-doop, boop-a-doop.